All right, well, let's get going. Efficient.
Dang.
Joining us today, we're going to dive into what every local business needs to know to be found online in 2025. I'm Jason Lynch, the head of marketing with NetSertive. And Garrett, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Garrett Stelly, digital marketing specialist here at NetSertive, specifically focused in SEO execution and strategy.
Awesome. And that's what we're really going to be diving into today is the organic side of discoverability in 2025. And just to introduce NetSertive, if you're not familiar with us, NetSertive has deep expertise in multi-location, hyper-localized marketing execution. So that means that we're running all the channels around locations, but at scale. So we work with both the national home office and the location stakeholders to scale strategies that help grow and hyper localize marketing touch points for your local markets. And we facilitated over $2 billion in media spend through our tech platform. And we actually just today, Entrepreneur came out with their list of top franchise suppliers, and we are ranked again on the list as number 6. So we love working with franchise and multi-location brands, and especially solving that problem around scaling that hyper-local marketing experience that your customers need in order to trust and choose you as their near me local provider. So we're going to get into a conversation today around everything that's changing with organic discoverability. And if you think about this from what every local business needs to know to be found online in 2025, right? So we're really focusing on organic channels. And in 2025, you've heard a lot of buzz around AI. And if you look at the data currently, the buzz is much bigger than the reality of how AI is driving traffic to local businesses. However, that is changing, and the goal with just being here today is to be on top of it, right? So you're all winning just by signing up for this webinar.
Right.
But the goal is to be on top of it and to make sure that you're building scaffolding in your business and and your digital presence so that you are discoverable by both humans and bots as they crawl your digital presence and evaluate you, right? So I think we're going to get into both SEO, the AI, AEO, looking at answer engine optimization. How do you get AI to how do you show up at AI if that's such a thing? Garrett's going to tell us, and
Yeah.
really what are the core fundamentals that you could be doing. And I know a lot of this is about the both literal and social contract that exists between the home office and franchisees, right? Are you doing everything you can do to provide the marketing programs that are going to grow a location? And so that's what we're going to get into today with making sure that the fundamentals are locked down, and then we're thinking about the future. So Garrett, how is the search experience changing?
Yeah. I just want to say one thing. You mentioned GEO or was it AEO? That that
Segment
kind of terminology is strictly forbidden from this. This is SEO without the jargon.
without the
No, I'm just kidding. I'm very much against needless acronyms personally. I just think they are a little confusing. But yeah, AEO, GEO, AIEO, EIEIO. You heard all of the acronyms that have popped up, and a lot of it is just hype, as Jason mentioned. But one thing he also said was about digital presence. And although that's, a digital presence and your search engine visibility are kind of the same thing, your digital presence has become more important in the past few months, really. So we're seeing that it's less important, what kind of optimization you make on your site and what kind of code you put in there and what specific words. And it is more about your digital presence, broad spectrum, how you appear on your Google listings, how you appear on local directories, and just as a whole, can some AI tool or some crawler learn about your business from that digital presence that you've established? So in this slide right here, we see two screenshots, and I felt like this was an accurate way to depict how exactly the search experience is changing, and specifically for those near me searches and local searches. Um, this is a search from my house is, I live in Lafayette, Louisiana. So this info is real and relevant to me. But 3 years ago, 2022, I would have searched soil companies near me, which is an actual thing I've been searching. I want to fix up my front yard, grow some grass. But it would have looked like this on the left, the desktop screenshot. You would have had your, we call that the map pack, your top 3 local results. And of course, these are GBP listings. This isn't, I mean, it's kind of based on your website, but mostly the results here are the GBP listings. And below that, we'll see those organic results, Lafayette materials down there. However, if you were to do this today, there's a pretty good chance that Google or Bing or whichever search engine you use would really push you towards an AI result. I did have to manually click the AI mode for this to show up, but I think it's safe to say that in the next year or so, we're going to see a lot more of this on the right. And one thing you'll notice in the difference is that on the left, we have a very transactional, very, here are your results kind of interface. Whereas on the right, it's more of like an article tailored to what exactly we're looking for. So you can see it's kind of telling me about my query rather than just giving me options for the answer. And this is massive, right? Jason and I were talking yesterday, when we were preparing for this, just about what AI mode results look like. And in their current state, they are a bit rudimentary. They're kind of basic. It's just text on a screen, maybe some folding, maybe some lists. There are links, of course, but I personally expect that to change very drastically very soon. That's just kind of my own vibes on it. But Jason, if you'll click forward, I'll show you an example of one AI tool that I don't use this AI tool personally very often. It's called Perplexity. It's kind of popular, but I do find that they are kind of leading the way in the design and the experience of what an AI conversational assistant might look like in the coming years. Of course, companies like Google and ChatGPT, they're taking a very steady and safe approach, whereas what you see here is, again, kind of the same thing, but they're moving towards a more interactive interface where you have, you can see the images, you can see the sources, you've got all the links right up there at the top. So you can kind of imagine how that AI mode from the previous slide that was just text might mold into something a bit more rich and a bit more interactive. And if you'll just click one more slide, this is the Perplexity Discover page. Again, I don't really use this tool, so it's just some basic information. But yeah, I would expect a lot of websites to start looking like this, kind of like the Yahoo News homepage looking thing. But as you use tools like this, they're going to, first of all, they're going to have integrations with anything you plug into them. So like your Google, or if you link your Facebook and you allow those permissions, they have the capability to kind of look into those and say, what do they usually look at and what kind of things do they interact with on the internet, and provide you information that's relevant to that. Of course, this existed before AI, but with AI tools now, it's kind of rapidly evolving how you can tailor somebody's experience to their preferences.
And I think that's a good call out on the way that AI is changing how information is served as well. And you have more control over the data that you're putting out there around each location and everything about your business, right? And controlling the specifics. And you can't always control how that is going to be served to someone, because the way that especially ChatGPT started doing this a lot, would you like this? And then it gives you a first result, and then the
Right.
follow-up is, would you like this?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah. And that's a
preference.
good call out too. In the world of AI, it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? Because like you said, you really can't control what somebody's going to ask for. Before that was true as well. You really couldn't control the kind of search somebody was going to do, but you could estimate it and you could measure it and kind of get a good idea of common phrases. And, in the past, when you're searching, the trend is more popular searches are shorter because, we're just trying to save time. We're just trying to get our answer. However, in modern AI tools, it's a lot more conversational. So you're going to have people inquiring about things that maybe they didn't before, or maybe it was just so low volume that nothing, there were really no blips on your radar about it. Um, yeah, and I'm going to touch on this a bit more, but things that are very specific and very niche to your company or your location are now more relevant than they were in the past, just because of visibility from tools like this.
Mhm. I think this one is really interesting too. I don't know if anyone else got that alert from Chrome that, Google is pushing people toward their AI experiences. So they're pushing toward AI mode, toward AI overviews, and they've said they're going to start putting ads in those, right? So monetizing their tools. And if you think of how much data Google gathers and how Google creates audiences and right wants to serve hyper personalized experiences, this kind of thing we're putting Gemini right in Chrome and having agentic browsing is just going to put more. It's like putting a sponge for data on right in your browsing experience, so you can serve more and more personalized things. So they just came out with this, which is similar to Perplexity's comment browser, if anyone has used that, but it's just pushing you to have an AI assistant browsing. So this is again, it's comparing, compare these three tabs that I have open, or it's like it's serving up the data and then going out and having that real time AI agent be directly interacting with the web on behalf. I don't know, so Gary, how are you seeing this?
Yeah, I will say I have to disagree with you. And this is just a personal preference. I'm not a big fan of the whole kind of shoving AI into everything everywhere, but I have come to terms with the fact that that is the current meta, so to speak, of digital marketing. It's here, right? Like we're looking at it right now. This is where massive tech platforms are moving. Whether or not it's going to stick around, we will see, but it's definitely here. So as marketers and business owners, we do have to kind of get used to it, understand how it works, and really the most important thing is understand how your users are using this. Yeah, I imagine there are a lot of other people like me that are just like, oh, get this out of my face. I want to use the old school search, but I would wager a bet to say a lot more people are going to be using tools like this just for convenience, maybe shiny object kind of thing. But yeah, I'm excited to see how this goes. Personally, I've been a little bit unimpressed with some of the integrated AI tools, just in general. I think it's all very new and young, so we're putting the cart before the horse, so to speak, in some situations. But as time goes on, we use a tool called Confluence for documentation. They have an embedded AI tool that I think is probably one of the best I've seen. It's really interesting. It uses things like it reads all of our internal documentation, so it can do something as simple as seeing an acronym, all those acronyms we all love, and by reading the other pieces of documentation that we have, even if it's an internal acronym that only we use to describe this thing, this AI can read our docs and know, oh, this stands for that. And to me, that was very impressive, and it's something that other integrated AIs don't really offer. So I like the fact that we're moving towards a more useful, example of how integrated AIs will work rather
Mhm.
than just being a chatbot on the sidebar. I'm
Yeah.
gonna take this I just want to mention if anybody has questions, please drop them in the Q&A or in the chat because we do have a Q&A section towards the end. So you can start loading those up while we chat about this kind of stuff.
I think a good thing to keep in mind is that if you're on this call, you are a data leader in your organization, right? Like you're responsible if it's at the home office level or a location level. Data is not going to, keep itself clean at this stage and where technology is. And so part of that is figuring out who your customers are, what are their habits, and even assessing where do you need to show up, right? We work with like a home theater integrators, right? That integrate really high-end home theaters. And maybe those customers are more tech forward, right? Whereas maybe if you're serving senior populations or, you know, moms with young kids, right? Maybe they're not as tech forward on some of their browsing habits. But I think a good exercise to run is figure out what are the most important things you need to know and run a contest of sorts internally. And you can even just do it with something as simple as a Google form. And if there are people out in the field, have them ask 2 people a day, how are you using AI? And answer it on the survey. And before you know it, you'll have a Google sheet with 100+ answers of how people are using AI, right? You can say, do you look for, hey, do you look for businesses like us at ChatGPT? No one's expecting someone to say that to them that's come to their house for service, but they're happy to answer, right? Because absolutely everyone is in some way using AI if they are, have the ability to reach out and call a business, even if they don't realize they're using AI, they're in some algorithm somewhere. So I think that's a great exercise to run just to have a real pragmatic approach to asking some of these questions around how have you adopted it. So if we look at some of those foundational pieces of reaching local audiences, Garrett, why don't you take us through this? Because you're the SEO guy.
Yeah, sure. And I do just want to comment on a call out you made earlier is definitely the use cases is a great exercise. It's something we're doing internally right now. The whole team, we've got the AI champions in this call right here, 2 of them. But yeah, we're kind of just assessing internally, asking other team members like, how are you using AI? Show us some examples. Let's share the prompts and the use cases, not only to just get a better understanding of how AI works, but also a better understanding of how it works within different departments. So either internally with your employees or with your customer base, just getting that feel of how they feel about AI, how they're using it, it'll definitely open your eyes to a lot of things you may not have considered at all in the past. But back to this slide, foundation for reaching local audiences. It's mostly the same. If you attended our last webinar on a similar topic, a lot of this stuff hasn't changed, although some of it has. Um, Creating informative content, that was a big one before the big AI boom and AI was everywhere, is that, you need to create pieces of content that answer the questions that your users are asking, that come from a standpoint of authoritativeness and trustworthiness and experience in your fields. And while that is still mostly true, I would say the fact that these AI tools are kind of giving answers to users without them having to go to a website, which is something we call a zero-click search. It's a big thing in SEO right now. And it's the fact that people are not generally clicking to your website as much as they were before because of these AI overviews. However, creating that informative content still positions you as the authority on that topic. It does make you more likely to get picked up in AI search results. It's not a guarantee, but it does still have a place. So I would say, if you were putting all the eggs in the local informative content basket, maybe kind of divvy that up a little bit, put a little bit of it into AI R&D, local search type stuff, because we are seeing, there's a lot of fluctuation in that world lately, specifically in regards to AI and SEO. Google Business Profile is another one. And this is kind of where the tides have shifted. Had you talked to me 6 months ago, I would say, oh, GBP is less important than focusing on local content. Since the AI switch happened sometime in January, that's what I see across our clients, is that there was a big shift around January, May. It's different for everybody, but it's kind of whenever AI search results took off and started capturing the bulk of content. And because of that, GDP is actually a lot more important to make sure you have it filled out, updated, make sure that you own it now more than ever, because in those AI search results, Jason, if you actually go back all the way back to that first slide with the screenshots, if you could do that, one thing you might notice is that on the left here, we have those GBP listings as the results, and the rest are all websites. However, in the AI mode on Google, if you're doing a local search, every single one of these links does not go to a website. They go to a GBP listing. And even if it does go to a website, it tries its hardest to keep you on the Google platform. So on something like ChatGPT, it'll send you straight to a website with a UTM parameter. In Google's AI mode, though, they really want to keep you on the Google platform. And that probably lends to what Jason was alluding to earlier, that Google is planning to put some kind of sponsored ad in this section that would explain why they want you to stay on the Google platform a lot. But a consequence of that is a lot of this information comes directly from your GBP and brings users to the GBP instead of the website, which is, again, that's a massive shift in how local SEO was positioned previously. Just a few months ago, the GBP was almost a footnote where definitely make sure it's filled out, definitely make sure it's accurate, updated, and conversion focused, but you weren't really expecting a lot of people to land on the GBP unless it was like through a map search. However, now that's probably going to be the first thing they see is the GBP. So definitely put a lot more focus on your Google business profile, information, completeness, all of that. And you can go back to the slide 8. Yeah, sorry, I'm making you jump around. My last point here, tracking key SEO metrics, again, has always been important, but now we have a new metric to track, and that's visitors from AI tools. I did allude to it just now, but if you are on ChatGPT and you type in soil companies near me, for instance, you'll most likely get a result that has a link, a hyperlink to a website. And one thing you may not have noticed is that all of those links from ChatGPT have what's called a UTM parameter at the end. And Jason, can I actually steal a screen away from you for a second? Just for a second. Oh yeah, there we go. And this one, sorry about that. But can we see the Chat GPT on my screen?
Yep.
Let me zoom in a little bit. So this is an example I just said, what are the top 10 SEO companies in America? And this right here is a link to that page. It looks like these links are broken or something, or this is an article. But if we click into that article and we take a look at the URL itself, and this is a bit technical, I do apologize. I try my hardest not to get too tech nerdy, but this right here, $UTM source ChatGPT. This is not something that this company, First Page Sage, put on their website. They did not hand code a UTM source ChatGPT. ChatGPT actually does this for every single one of their links. So that is to say, if you have a filter in your Google Analytics, or if you have an event, that's looking for any visits from a page that contains this, that's a really simple, surefire way to see, at least who's coming from ChatGPT, which pages are they going to, maybe even what they're searching. A bit more involved on that one, but yeah, the tracking, whatever you want to call it, how to track SEO metrics and analytics has also changed. While we're kind of using the same reports, strategies, and tactics, we're tracking different things than we have in the past. Rankings are kind of losing relevance because, of course, in an AI response, there is no rank. There's just, do you show up or not? And you really don't have much control over the hierarchy at which you rank, more so in an AI result compared to just a traditional local result. All right, this is a fun one. Try to speed through this one, not talk so much. But yeah, showing up on AI platforms is a big hot button issue, topic, talking point, whatever you want to call it. And it's worth a lot of thought, I would say, because whenever AI results and AI conversations first got real mainstream, everybody wanted to show up in them. But you really have to ask yourself, do I want to show up in AI search results? Is that where my customers are? Are they using these search tools? And does it help me at all to show up in these results? You don't want to invest too much into something that's not going to see return. So while it is definitely worth considering, I would say, take it slow and kind of assess the situation and determine how you want to show up, why you want to show up, what pages you'd like to show up, because it's definitely a different ball game than just your traditional search.
And I think a lot of people think of it as the best X near me. I think I haven't heard many people that we talk to, right, that are mostly franchise multi-location marketers at the home office, thinking about their digital presence. They're really thinking about AI how do I show up in AI when someone searches for the best category near me, right?
Right.
Or in a certain town. And so it is really, I love just the idea of thinking, how is someone's mindset different? How is their behavior different when they're having a conversation and trying to solution a problem, right? So if they're really, if you have a long considered purchase, right? And that's what your sales cycle does. And it involves a lot of research. That's a very different potential content play than if you're, an emergency plumber, right? Or like a fire, you know, like cleanup
Yeah. And
company.
the last time you and I were on actually, I think it might have been Nick,
Mm,
but you were involved in that. Last time we did a webinar like this, I think we even tried to get screenshots of near me searches
mm,
in the AI results, and they didn't even show. We couldn't even get
yeah,
the AI mode to display local results. And now that's completely flipped on its head. It's kind of tailored for local search now. And kind of what you were just mentioning, how, most people that are interacting with an AI conversation or tool, they're having more of a conversation, of a deep research kind of, you know, method going on. Whereas something like emergency plumber, you don't need all that. You just need a phone number, right? You just need to click, I have an emergency. Yeah, exactly. So local search and organic results definitely are still relevant. And I think we're going to see a lot more specialization in the use case based on the query, which is what I call, the search. That's what a lot of technical people refer to it as, a query rather than a keyword. But um, what we're seeing is that AI mode and AI tools are used for long tail searches, which, if you've never heard that before, if you've ever gone on Google and typed up something really verbose, companies near me with the letter P in their name that sell, 30-inch tires or something like that, and you get that little monster guy fishing, and it's just like, whoops, no results. That's kind of a thing of the past. Anything that would have previously yielded no results is now piped into an AI conversation tool, and it kind of gives you a much more rich answer to your rich question. So, yeah, long tail searches back in the day, 10 years ago, that was like, oh, write a blog post about a long tail search, or make a social media post about it. Now it's a heavy consideration to make, because um, like I just said, companies that sell 30-inch tires or whatever it is, if you don't have that information on your website, on your GBP, these AI tools aren't going to be able to provide that answer to your users. So they're going to go to your competitors. And if they answer that question, that's essentially a lost lead, or a rank you could have outranked your competitor in, but missed out. So yeah, it's still definitely same concept, just in a different strategy.
yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah, this is a fun one. If you look at your analytics and your metrics, you probably noticed this. Like I said, around January, May of this year, a lot of websites that rely heavily on informational content. Jason, we talked earlier, that's mostly like B2B, or kind of not so much conversion focused, but just information focused sites and content. And yeah, you will likely see a decrease in just raw organic traffic to those blogs. And like I mentioned as well, that's because people are getting their answers from the AI mode, from the results. All these zero-click searches, they really have no need to click into the website if their answers already been questions already been answered, right? Um, you can move on, because I do have one point at the end of this that bounces off of that. Yeah, Google Business Profile and structured data. This is something I hinted on earlier. These results are trying to take everything they can about either your business or the question being asked. So that's why it's important to have your GBP fully fleshed out. And as well, I mentioned structured data. If you've ever heard of Schema, a little bit more technical, but it is becoming more relevant and important again than it has been in the past. Like I always tell everybody, if you can have local business schema, just some really basic schema on your site, you should be good to go. And now, not so much. If you can have any type of schema, and if you're unfamiliar with schema, it's essentially a way of structuring and marking up information on your website that provides, sorry, this is hard to explain, but it provides information to other tools like AI tools and crawlers about entities on your site. So that could be your physical location. It could be an author or a book or a product. if you sell cars, you would have schema about the vehicle, because there's only so much you can put on the screen for the reader until it becomes overwhelming and messy. But with schema, you kind of put code on the back end that these AI tools and these search tools and the crawlers can read in a way that's like, ah, yes, I understand every single bit of information you've provided to me. And they don't have to actually read the page. Of course they do, but that kind of technical information, structured data informs them a lot cleaner, better, more information at once as well. Yeah, and that last point, focus on conversions. I mentioned earlier that people are getting their answers from these zero-click searches. They're searching a question, getting the answer, going about their day. However, if a user does decide to click into your result or your website, that's an extremely hot lead, right? Like they've done their research, they know what to look for, they're ready to convert if they land on your website. So for that reason, I say focus on conversions, focus on, if your website is broken or slow or anything like that, definitely get that fixed. But always make sure that if a user lands on a page from an AI search or just from anything, there's a clear path to your contact or your call now or whatever your conversion action is for that website.
Yeah, that's good. We got a question from Kevin around, do you think schema markups would help the informational content for AI results? I would say it depends on the information that you're providing, but if it's, I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, I would say maybe if you could just expand upon what you mean by the informational content. If you're saying like specific questions, yeah, it's definitely what Jason said. It really depends on the question. Schema specifically is surrounding entities. You can have a schema type of an article or a blog. However, schema is really used to describe very in-depth about a certain entity, whether that's an organization or a product. So I would think of it more as like, if I ask the AI a question about companies that are located in Acadia Parish, that's a physical location around me. It's right. It's not the city. It's not the state. It's a parish or counties, right? If you don't explicitly mention that on your website or in your schema, schema includes GPS data, latitude and longitude, right? So these AI, they're very good at working with data in this structured format. So it could, refer to any companies in a given radius and say, hey, this is Acadia Parish. Do any of these latitude, longitudes mark up with my circle, right? And that's something that just reading a page really couldn't do for you in the past. Whereas now they can process this data in different ways. And because we have so much of it, there are very creative ways to do that. Yeah, focus less on creating informative content. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I hope I could answer your question, but schema is
Good. I think another thing, like Garrett's, or like, Kevin had mentioned in his question, he followed up with, if we're focusing less maybe on informative content, I think schema can definitely help with the content that you do have. If it is an article, tagging it as an article with schema. If it's like Q&A, right? FAQ, you're answering questions.
Absolutely. Totally forgot about those.
Schema as think of it like a label or a tag for the content is the type of, you're basically flagging that, hey, this random number here, that's actually the latitude and longitude of this location. So it's not just random latitude and longitude. It is a lat long of a specific location. And that can tell Google, okay, if I know where this page is geographically pinned, right? This location page is geographically pinned to this latitude and longitude, and this person is searching on a mobile phone near this page, it can factor that in, right? Like, it's thinking of how you can break down your content. So if you do have an FAQ page, if you have a, question and answer, articles, blogs, there's all kinds of tags that can help, both traditional SEO and, all the different new kinds of bots that are crawling your code. Definitely can still.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and move forward. I do touch back up on this again. I apologize for even bringing schema into the conversation. It's a bit more technical than what most people are used to, but I personally believe that those kinds of
great chat. Let him know you got to be doing that.
And it's something that we've always, in SEO, since I started doing SEO in 2017, it's always been on the radar, right? Like it's always been a consideration. If you're hardcore SEO person, you put a schema on every page, it's relevant. But traditionally, just in general, it's not something I would say would have moved the needle a few years ago, just because it wasn't, there was nothing that could properly utilize the information you were providing with schema, just because search engines, they used a little bit of it, right? They use certain schema types. Now with AI tools, they're able to pick up that schema and make sense of it in an instant without having to create entire systems around it, right? So it's the way that we're processing information that's changing, not so much how we're providing that information.
All right. So a big aspect of your digital presence, though, is your Google Business Profile. And there are certainly enough Google Business Profiles out there that are not optimized or managed to merit discussing. So what do you think, Garrett? How are you seeing this out in the wild?
Yeah, this goes right back to the schema thing. Like I said, schema has always existed, just like that Google Business Profiles have always existed. And the best advice I could have ever given was, hey, make sure it's filled out as much as possible, make sure all of it's accurate. But in the past, there was just no great way to utilize that information. As we've seen now with our examples, I could say something like, which businesses near me have a handicap accessible bathroom? Again, a piece of information that's always been there. You've always been able to put that on your GDP. There was just no logical way for people to find that, just because people weren't searching it, or Google didn't provide that information in a way that was useful. But now that we have these AI conversation searches, all of that information is much more important than it has been in the past. Like I said, it's always been there. You should have always been updating it, but now there's much more of a reason to do so, right? You might actually see conversions, or at least leads that got to you from that information that you updated. I don't know if I answered your question. I apologize. Kind of just went off on that one.
No, it's great.
And Matt, we do see your question. We're gonna get to it in the Q&A section. Just a couple of slides I want to knock out. But this, again, when we talk about structured information, we talk about your schema, your GBP. This is essentially what I mean, and that is, how much information can you possibly provide within the realms of the fields that are provided to you, either in your GBP, in schema, on your website, wherever it is. Again, all of that stuff is a lot more important now more than ever. I mentioned, like handicap accessible bathrooms. We also have like your amenities, your categories, accessibility. Service options have always been kind of the main focus. If I tell somebody to improve their GBP, I would usually say, start with categories and services, right? But now I would say, fill it all out. If you have the time, honestly, skip the categories and services, because those take up the most time. Fill out all of the other miscellaneous information, then come back to the categories and service and spend the most time kind of refining that to make sure it's nice and informative. As well, profile, address, contact details, business info, your social network URLs. This is all stuff that, I would have advised on in the past in the same way. I just think it's a lot more important to do so now. And I have local competitors here, and that's an interesting one. You don't actually list out your local competitors, but I think it's extremely important to keep tabs on your local competitors and see the kind of results that they get versus what you get. Like maybe you'll search up your company or your main service, and you'll see, hey, my competitor says that they have free parking, but mine doesn't say that, right? Is it because you don't have free parking, or is it because you didn't fill that out on the GBP, right? So definitely looking at your competitors, national competitors as well, is really good to look at, like your Terminix and your Orkins, right? Because they're all over this kind of stuff. They've been filling all of this stuff out from day one. So just looking at them to kind of get an idea of what's important, what's actually going to show up, right? You want to take this one, Jason?
Sure. So I think people really leave a lot on the table, like Garrett was saying, around their Google business profile. And even if you're selling physical products, right, you can use your GVP as a virtual showroom. You can put pricing, images, links of your products. Like put it right there. Like we were talking about controlling your data. You can put your products right in your Google business profile. If you offer services, you can have your GBP act as a virtual catalog and it have each offer you provide and just generate leads directly from your Google business profile. And this is something we see a ton when there's a really mature digital network. They have a lot of traffic that's flowing through their GBPs. It is a constant that's going to be the case where they're really successful with their GBP for location-based businesses because it's just Google, as you can see, is elevating that above any web results.
Yeah. And before we get to this one, I do actually want to answer Matt's question because we are at time. I apologize. I'm trying to be quick. But Matt, you said you're updating your franchise development website. I'm familiar with that. Top 3 things we should be adding, focusing on to make our site easier to find for prospects, utilizing all these new tools. I will just go back to the point of the suggestions and the advice for SEO are mostly unchanged, right? Everything that I would have said 6 months ago is mostly the same. It's more about what you put your focus on and where you expect to see return, right? Like a year ago, it wouldn't have been worth focusing on AI tools because they really weren't popular. Now they're extremely popular and they're everywhere. So while you would have taken that in consideration in the past, it's much more of a consideration now. Specifically for your website, a franchise development website, I will say the absolute number one most important thing for your website and anybody's website is what's called the UX, the user experience. And the most important piece of that is the responsiveness and the load time. If you are a franchise development website, I imagine that you have maybe a large list of franchises like a directory or something like that. Those kinds of websites, especially if you're running on WordPress or something, not exactly built specifically for that activity, those sites can get really bloated and really slow. And that has a massive impact on every single piece of digital marketing. Just the most basic, if a user goes and tries to find something and they can't because it's slow or it's not easy to find or it takes a lot of clicks, they're just going to leave, right? Like they're just going to go to your competitors. But on the flip side, if it takes a crawler like Googlebot, which are the tools that go and read every website on the internet to get information, if it takes them longer than a set amount of time, what amount of time it is, I really don't know, but about maybe 10 seconds. If it takes more than 10 seconds for a page's content to fully load because there's like a render hanging or there's some script that's broken, they're also just going to leave. You'll never get the opportunity to be indexed or discovered. But it really does come back to that human user, right? Because the reason why Google acts that way is because if a real person were to do what it was trying to do, they just give up. They get impatient. I know I would, in 2025 where pages load in 0.2 seconds, 10 seconds is a lifetime. So I would say top 3 things is definitely user experience, all 3 of them. But outside of that, definitely making sure your tracking is, rock solid. I mentioned earlier that you can actually track visits from ChatGPT and to a lesser extent, things like Google's AI mode, but you definitely want to learn how to find that easily and how to find that information quickly and easily through tools like Google Analytics. I apologize. My cat's trying to break into my room right now. But yeah, making sure you know what it is that you're looking for and what your success metrics are and how to see them in a way that makes sense to you, because reporting is its own beast, right? Like you pull up a Google Analytics report and it's like, what is all of this, right? So just making sure those 2 things are foundational and solid is definitely the best thing you can do for online success. And franchise development is an interesting one because you're probably going to see the fall off from AI search results the most because a lot of your content is probably informational, asking questions.
Yeah, I think that it does also merit the schema, making sure that FAQs, if you have reviews, like get reviews from franchisees and add them and tag them with reviews, right? Like with the review, so you can have really clear structured data and thinking about how this might be crawled. I know also with Franda, there's your whole digital footprint on lists, on Reddit, on these other websites and how they talk about your brand, making sure that's really consistent. And if you can get on any top X lists, right, for your category. That's really helpful. I know that goes beyond the website, but all right, Garrett, I know we're
Yeah, that's part of it, man. That's a
yeah,
big part of it. Digital PR. Yeah.
end with this one question for people. In conclusion here, there's so much to consider. How do I
Perfect
know
segue.
the right thing to focus on?
Yeah, love this question. Definitely reuse it from the last webinar because I just think this is a great question to kind of send you all off into the world with, clear focus. And I kind of mentioned it earlier, but the number one thing you should focus on is the thing that helps you reach your current goal for your digital marketing and your digital presence. And as an SEO person, I've seen a lot of people obsessed with ranking number one for this very specific keyword or, ranking and ranking and ranking. At the end of the day, rank does nothing for you if people aren't purchasing your product or signing up for your service, right? So it's a bit of a non-answer. I do apologize, but focus on the thing that gives you the highest return, that you see the most engagement on. If you see people using more of your informational pages and your blog posts and getting answers to their questions, focus on that because that's what people come to you for. Don't try to force your users to do what you want them to do. Instead, allow them to do the thing that they're already trying to do and kind of facilitate that, right? Whether that's clicking a button to call you or finding a blog post to answer their questions or, whatever it is, that conversion. Um, let's see what else I have in here. Yeah, Google Business Profile. If you have access to a location's Google Business Profile, your location, right? I say go and open that up right now. First of all, make sure you have access to it. That's a big thing. It's very hard to keep access to GBPs, especially if you're switching owners and stuff like that. Go in there, click edit my profile, and look at every single option. If there is an empty field or an empty cell, put an answer in there, right? No field should go unanswered or empty, unless of course you simply can't answer that question, right? But yeah, start there. Definitely the GBP, fill it out, make sure it's nice and visible, make sure your info is updated, your hours are correct, and also making sure that your GBP, your website, and the actual facts of your business are all lined up and correct. If sometimes I see one set of hours on the GBP, a different set on the website. And when I talk to the client, they're like, oh, neither of those are our current opening hours. That's just the most common example. But yeah, definitely go right now to your GBP and make sure it's fully fleshed out and optimized. Don't change the name and don't change the address. That's a big no-no. That will get you flagged and unpublished, but everything else is fair game.
That's awesome. All right, Garrett, thank you so much for your insights and time here. And to all of you for spending some time with us, just having a good conversation about what we're seeing. And would love to hear from you all. If you have any further questions, you want us to take a look, we do have some tools that we're using to look at a brand's digital presence from both an organic and an AI answer engine type approach. So would be happy to take a look and tell you what we're seeing and what our tools are suggesting for how to optimize your digital presence. So really appreciate again you spending time with us today. So thanks a lot, everyone.